My name is Caroline. I'm 35 years old, currently living and working in Austin, Texas. I'm a financial consultant used to cold numbers and sharp decisions. But nothing in my career could have prepared me for the feeling of being erased from my own family. On the night of December 15th, I received an email with a simple subject line, Christmas Plan Update. I opened it expecting the usual, a list of dishes, gathering times, or gift exchange schedule like every other year. But no, it was the transcript of a family meeting I knew nothing about. And at the bottom of that document, one line froze everything inside me. We all voted. Caroline will not be invited to Christmas this year. No explanation, no apology. No one asked how I was doing, what I needed, whether I was okay. I didn't call, I didn't text. I simply opened my laptop, logged into my bank account, and began shifting every financial control tied to the family home into my name. Have you ever? It's been quietly written out of your own family's life, as if you'd never existed. Have you ever asked yourself why you keep carrying the weight for a place you're no longer welcome? If you've ever felt pushed to the margins, leave a comment below. Tap like if you've ever kept quiet to keep the peace. And don't forget to follow the channel to hear the rest of this story. Because what they did next was the coldest part of that winter. I read that email 4 times, not because I didn't understand it, but because I couldn't believe they had actually written it and sent it like it was perfectly normal. In all 35 years of my life, I had never missed a single Christmas with the family. No matter how busy I was, no matter how exhausted, I always made arrangements to fly back to Greenville. I used to think that if I just tried a little harder, kept everything warm and peaceful just a little longer, there would always be a place for me at that table. But this year, they had a meeting. They voted. They decided I shouldn't come anymore. No one called. No one asked why I had been quiet the past few weeks. No one noticed that I hadn't canceled my flight, that I still had my paid time off scheduled since October. I opened the old family group chat, where we used to share photos, plans, silly updates. The name had been changed to The Real Crew. I wasn't in the member list anymore. No notification that I had been removed. No one mentioned me. I scrolled through the recent shared photos. One was taken in my mother's living room. In the background was a dark green curtain I had bought years ago at an antique market in Asheville. Mom stood in the center, holding a sheet of paper, the chandelier reflecting against her glasses. Beside her was Ethan, my brother, leaning toward his wife Jenna, who was smiling like she had just won something. The caption underneath, written by my cousin Kayla, read, Family Vote Deck 10, a peaceful, holiday, drama-free. I took a screenshot, not to keep as proof, but to remind myself this was really happening. I started tracing back every detail, every small sign I had brushed off, like how I stopped receiving emails about the charity gift list, or when I texted Jenna asking if she needed help with the party, and she just replied flatly, everything's already assigned. I remembered last week when I came across a post from Mom on Facebook asking for donations, listing names of contributors to the Warm Holiday program. It included Jenna, Ethan, Kayla, even my cousin's new boyfriend, but not me. My apartment was quiet at that moment, just the sound of the kettle boiling and the soft yellow light from the kitchen. I stood still, flooded with a swirl of thoughts. All these years, I believed that if I kept doing the right thing quietly, the love would eventually return. But silence only made it easier for others to rewrite your role in their lives. I opened a drawer and took out my notebook. On the first page was a list of all the expenses I had covered over the past 3 years. Plumbing repairs after last year's storm, the porch upgrade, fire insurance I had taken out just to make it easier, as Mom asked. I added one more line. December 15th, email removing me from the Christmas plan. I sat down on the couch, resting my forehead on the back of my hand. Behind those neatly listed lines were hundreds of hours of overtime, countless bank calls, long drives to Greenville just to install fixtures, replace the stove, fix the windows, all because I believed I was part of that place. I had truly believed it. My phone rang. It was Harper, my cousin. I hesitated for a few seconds before answering. Her voice was soft but rushed. Caroline, I just saw that family vote picture. I didn't know they really did that. I said nothing. I heard her breathing heavily, then whispering like she was afraid someone might hear. I think they planned it for a while. I saw an email from Jenna to my mom back in November, saying, we should be more selective this year to avoid unnecessary tension. I gripped the phone tighter. Harper continued, I just want you to know not everyone agreed with it. I can't say much, but I'm sorry, Caroline. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. It's okay, Harper. Thank you for calling. After the call ended, I leaned back. The hurt inside me wasn't loud, wasn't screaming. It simmered like hot coals under ash. I didn't cry. Tears didn't come as easily anymore now that I was in my 30s. I opened my laptop, logged into the asset and banking system. I looked at the recurring payment for the house in Greenville, $1,462 every month, not missed once in 36 months. Next, I opened my digital archive, where I kept every invoice, contract, and a financial power of attorney signed by my mother, notarized in July of 2020. I once thought it was a stepping stone, a temporary solution after she lost her teaching job. I believed she would honor her promise to return shared ownership once things stabilized. Now I understood. Temporary to them meant permanent, as long as Caroline keeps paying. I wasn't angry anymore. Only cold clarity remained. Like someone waking from a long sleep, finally seeing the full picture of the family I once clung to. I closed the laptop. I didn't delete anything. I simply folded away each document, each piece of the history I had helped build. No one noticed when I showed up, but they would notice when I stepped away. And that was only the beginning. I still remember the day Mom called me, her voice shaky because the roof had started leaking after the first rainstorm of the season. It was late 2020, the country still reeling from the crisis. She said she had been scammed out of nearly $4,000 by a contractor. I was in a conference room when I got the call. The sound of rain on her end felt like water pouring into my chest. Caroline, I don't know what to do. Ethan says he's busy. Jenna told me to hire a bigger company, but I don't have the money to pay twice. I know you're stretched too, but I didn't let her finish. Okay, Mom. Just find another contractor. I'll front the money. We'll deal with it later. I said later to everything. Roof repairs, plumbing, electrical rewiring, late property taxes. I wrote them all down in my ledger, snapped photos of the bills, filed them away. We'll sort it out later. But later never came. I remember winter weekends driving to Greenville just to sign roofing contracts. Mom would bake banana bread, still familiar, still fragrant, but she no longer waited to eat it with me. I'd come, handle the paperwork, then quietly check into a hotel nearby because Jenna said the house was full, the kids needed their space. I didn't blame anyone. I told myself, I'm doing this for Mom, I don't need recognition. I remember back in 2021, Greenville was hit by a massive storm. The entire neighborhood was flooded. My mom called me close to midnight. I could hear the water rushing and her voice trembling through the phone. The next morning, I drove over 3 hours back, put on gloves, and shoveled mud alongside the local relief team. I didn't see Ethan all day. Late in the afternoon, he finally showed up for 10 minutes. He stood in the yard and called out, Caroline's here already? Impressive. Fits the background support role. Then he waved and left. I still smiled. I kept telling myself, I'm the one holding this house together. I don't need anyone's praise. Mom would often say, you're amazing. Always know exactly what to do. But she never once said, thank you for helping me. I used to believe love didn't need conditions, but there were 2 days I came home, dropped off bags of groceries, checked the electric meter myself, called the plumber, wiped down the kitchen after Jenna left it a mess because she was busy with the kids. I looked around and realized no one asked if I had eaten. No one saved me a plate. They just assumed I would show up, fix things, and quietly leave like an unnamed helper. One time, I suggested putting part of the house under my name to help split tax responsibilities. Mom nodded, said, Let me check with the lawyer. Don't forget to save receipts. And then, no one ever brought it up again. Instead, every year during tax season, I'd receive letters from the city reminding me about property tax deadlines. Each time, I'd log into my account, pay on time, and note the payment under advance pending resolution. I thought I was doing it out of love, out of duty. But the more time passed, the more I realized I was being treated like a walking ATM. No one asked if I was tired, if I could afford it. They just said, "Caroline's strong. She can handle it." Strong. There were nights I sat in front of my laptop, watching my personal budget shrink after each advance payment. I lived in a small rental apartment in Austin. No fancy decor, no garden, no dishwasher. The house Mom lived in was spacious, had a front yard, a back porch, even a rocking chair on the balcony that I'd bought her for her birthday. They lived in the comfort I provided, but no one remembered I was part of it. Last February, the electrical system in the house broke down. Mom called again. Jenna sent me one short message. "Can you help, Mom? I'm taking the kids out." I called the electrician, booked the appointment, paid the bill. The quote was over $8,000. I didn't pay immediately. I texted Ethan and Mom to ask if either of them could contribute. Ethan read the message. Mom called back and said softly, "Can you take care of it for now? I'm a little tight with the insurance bills." I sighed. "Okay," and added another line to my spreadsheet. I live by numbers. Each payment felt like a piece of love I thought I was holding on to. But really, I was just extending the silence they gave me. They didn't need to yell, didn't need to push me away. They just stopped saying my name. I once half-joked to Mom, "I've lived here nearly my whole adult life. Am I not on any of the house paperwork?" She smiled, folded her newspaper, and said, "This house belongs to the family. No need to split it." I stayed silent. I used to think like her, but I didn't know, one day, I'd be the one erased from that word family. And no one would think anything was wrong. The text came on a Friday morning. I was sitting in my usual coffee shop near the office, still holding a cappuccino I hadn't sipped yet, when my phone lit up. The screen showed Mom, the contact name I'd never changed in decades. I opened it. Just one short message, no exclamation marks, no question marks, no emotion. "Sweetheart, I think it's best you stay in Austin this year. Ethan and Jenna are trying to keep things peaceful for the kids." I read it over and over, as if it had come from a stranger. I wasn't angry. The strongest feeling in me was clarity, as if someone had placed a cold mirror in front of me. No filters, no tint, just truth, plain and undeniable. I typed back just 3 words. "Thank you, Mom." No period, no anger. I set my phone down and looked out the cafe window. Austin's sky was clear that day, with a crisp chill in the air. A young family walked by, a little girl about 4 tugging at her mom's hand, begging to carry a cotton candy bigger than her head. The mother laughed, knelt down to hug her, and said something that made all 3 of them burst into giggles. I watched them not with sadness, not with envy, just stillness. I once believed that if I did enough, endured enough, I'd be seen. But the people I tried so hard for, they weren't blind. They saw me clearly, and still chose to turn away. I returned to my tiny apartment just before noon, opened my laptop and sat down. No hesitation. I logged into my bank's mortgage payment portal. The December auto payment still showed, scheduled for the 22nd as always. I didn't cancel it. I just stared at that number for a long time, a number no one ever asked if I could afford, or if I even wanted to keep paying. I left it as is, then opened the folder labeled Greenville House. It was filled with receipts, repair confirmations, before and after photos of the new roof, scanned bills for electricity, gas, insurance. I sorted them by year, renamed the files for clarity. Then I opened a new document and titled it boldly, Financial Contributions, 2022-2023. I began typing out every payment, every expense I once thought of as a small thing. Those small things, in hindsight, added up to a fortune. I worked straight through until evening, skipping lunch. When I finally looked up, the sun had dipped low outside my window. My phone was still silent. No follow-up message from Mom. Not a single check-in to ask if I was okay after being invited to stay away this year. I stepped into the kitchen, and made myself a cup of chamomile tea. The apartment was quiet, save for the gentle bubbling of water in the kettle and the ticking of the wall clock counting each minute steadily. I opened a cabinet and pulled out an old tin box from the top shelf, the one where I kept birthday cards, handwritten letters from Mom during high school, scribbles from Ethan back when he was a teenager. Even a full letter I'd written to Mom after my first college summer break, describing my tiny dorm room and how much I missed our family dinners. I didn't read them again. I just quietly slid each memory into a file folder and placed it on the shelf. Then I scrolled back through. Old texts from Jenna. Most were short, curt requests. Can you lend Mom the car that day? Or, the dryer you got Mom isn't working. Can you check it? No, thank yous. No emotional check-ins. I found one from last Christmas, when Jenna sent the list of dishes to prepare. I still remember making the roast and pecan pie exactly as requested, delivering them after a long workday. I set them on the table, cleaned up the containers, and quietly took a seat at the far end of the dining room. The kids were on iPads. Jenna and Mom posed by the tree for pictures. No one invited me into the frame. That night, I slept in the laundry room, the room they called a convenient space for Caroline to stay overnight. Back then, I told myself it was unintentional. But this year, I no longer have any doubts. They are choosing a life without me, and I no longer want to fight for a place that isn't mine anymore. I returned to my desk and opened a new document. This one had a simple title, Greenville Exit Plan, not out of bitterness, but because I want to live my life, somewhere my presence is more than just convenient, where it actually matters. I typed the first line. Step 1. Review all assets under the name Caroline Adams Home, Utilities, Insurance. And I began. Calmly, no rush. But I didn't push it aside with a vague promise of, maybe later, because later is now. I woke up earlier than usual the next morning. It was still dim outside, streetlights casting soft shadows across the floor through the window. I brewed a pot of black coffee, no sugar, then sat down on the living room floor, back leaning against the sofa, laptop on my lap. There was an odd feeling inside me, part hollow, part solid, as if I had just stepped across an invisible threshold, the kind where I no longer waited to be invited in. I reopened the financial archive folder. Every time I thought I had organized it all, I found another layer. I searched by year, opening folders from 2019 backward, scanning through tax confirmations, bank statements, and documents tied to the Greenville house. Then, in a folder labeled simply Roof 2020, I found a scanned PDF. No bold title, no urgent markings, just one old file among hundreds of others. I clicked it open. One page, then two, then three. I sat upright. It was a copy of a temporary financial power of attorney agreement signed in July 2020. My name was clearly listed under the line, co-borrower for renovation, loan of residence at 147 Brookside Lane, Greenville, NC. The signature at the bottom belonged to Linda Adams, my mother. Right beside it was a note from the notary. Legal validity remains effective until ownership transfer is completed or written revocation is submitted. I didn't recall ever seeing any revocation notice, and I certainly had never signed anything to withdraw my rights. I flipped to my email inbox, typed in keywords like revoke and power of attorney, searching for any related documents. Nothing. No email. No files sent or received to terminate my financial rights. I sat motionless for a few minutes, then slowly drew in a long breath. Not because I was surprised, but because I realized I was holding on to something more valuable than any Christmas gift I had ever given my family. I wasn't the outsider they treated me as. I wasn't a loaner they could forget. I was the legal co-signer on the core financial contract of that home. And none of them, not my mother, not Ethan, not Jenna, had ever mentioned it seriously for the past 3 years. I picked up my phone and looked up Mr. Wells's number, the attorney who had worked with me when I bought my first apartment in Austin. He was thorough, discreet, and incredibly skilled with family property cases. I texted, "Hello, Mr. Wells. I need to schedule an urgent consultation regarding financial rights on a co-owned property. Is there any time available this week?" Not even 20 minutes later, he called back. "Caroline, how have you been? I have a morning slot open tomorrow if you need it." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "I'll be there." That evening, I printed out the entire document set and bound it into a thick file. Then I wrote a list of questions I needed answers to: current legal validity, administrative intervention rights, ability to request asset audits, and most importantly, the possibility of transferring property ownership if the other party violated agreements or engaged in deliberate exclusion. The next morning, I arrived at his law office with the file in hand. The waiting room was quiet, chairs covered in dark fabric, the faint scent of aged wood and coffee lingering in the air. When Mr. Wells stepped out, gray suit and worn leather briefcase, I saw his eyes pause on my face longer than usual. "I've reviewed the terms you sent," he said as we sat at the table, his voice calm and steady. "And I must say, this isn't just a temporary right. You're holding part of the structural financial control over that property." I stayed silent. He turned a page. "Based on clauses 3 and 6 in the contract, you have every right to request quarterly financial reports, participate in any decisions involving modifications, crisis, and pull funding if there's any sign of misuse or conflict of interest." I gave a soft laugh, without joy. None of them ever thought I had any rights left. He set his glasses down. "Caroline, I've been doing this work for nearly 30 years. Family gets messy when it involves property, but the law isn't emotional. If you choose to move forward, we can begin the process of requesting a full audit of all transactions related to the house. And if the other side doesn't respond in due time, you could petition the court to temporarily freeze usage rights until duties and entitlements are clarified." I nodded slowly. I don't want to cause a storm, but I can't keep getting sidelined from something I poured time and money into preserving. Mr. Wells looked at me like a father contemplating advice for his grown daughter. "No pity. Just quiet understanding. Then we start one step at a time. Everything needs to be documented, clear, emotionless." I left his office just before noon, sunlight pouring through the car window making me squint. Inside, I didn't feel boiling or frozen. I just felt clear. Like standing atop a hill, behind me the silent years of carrying everything alone. Ahead of me a new path, not glamorous, not easy, but clean and mine. I started the car and turned away from Greenville. I didn't call my mother, didn't text Ethan, didn't schedule a grown-up conversation with Jenna. I did nothing that the old Caroline would have done. The woman I used to be might have kept it quiet, tried not to make anyone uncomfortable, and ended up standing on the sidelines of her own life story. I wasn't her anymore. That afternoon, I came home, opened my laptop, and pulled up the revised file. Numbers, detailed entries of every contribution over the past 3 years, sat there cold but clear. Each page an undeniable record. I placed them in a new folder, simply titled Proof. I opened another browser tab, accessed the property management portal at the bank where I was listed as co-sponsor. The Greenville house still had my name in the borrower field, marked as active, with no record of revoked co-ownership. I clicked into the documents section and downloaded the mortgage payment history, each line marked paid by Caroline A. Even the months Ethan said he'd reimburse later. Even the times Jenna messaged, "You cover this first, we'll pay next month." Not a single cent had returned. I took screenshots of the full statement, saved it as a PDF, then added it to the proof folder. That night, I cooked a simple meal: pasta, steamed vegetables, a half-full glass of red wine. I sat alone in my small kitchen, warm yellow light spilling across the chipped wooden table. The apartment was tiny, but everything was mine. Every dollar, every decision. No one to interfere. No vote to exile me from this space. I played soft jazz, then flipped my phone screen down onto the table. Nothing from my mother. No check-in. No word from Harper or Kayla. Everything remained silent, as if they believed I had already received the message. I understood. They just didn't know I had a message of my own. The next morning, as the early winter sun filtered through the curtains, I opened my eyes and rose earlier than usual. I ate a neat breakfast, then called the insurance company. The woman on the other end had a calm, pleasant voice. "How may I assist you today?" "I'd like to verify and adjust the payment rights on the insurance policy for the home at 147 Brookside Lane, Greenville. I'm a co-policy holder. I'd like to temporarily suspend my funding from this account." The employee hesitated for a few seconds. "To complete this request, we'll need either confirmation from the other party or legal documentation proving your authority. I have an active, unrevoked financial power of attorney, a still valid loan agreement, and a 3-year history of payments. I can send all documents to your legal department." She was silent for a moment, then spoke softly. "In that case, yes, you're entitled to request a unilateral temporary suspension of funding. I'll email you confirmation and full instructions." I documented every step, saved the email, and added all files to the folder labeled Proof. That same afternoon, I called an independent real estate appraisal company. A man named Marcus answered. His tone was firm but not unfriendly. "What property would you like to have reappraised?" "I'm a financial co-owner of a house in Greenville, but I haven't been granted access or involvement for years. I'd like an independent appraisal report of the current condition, interior, yard, structural status, and if possible, detailed photographs." "Understood. We'll need legal access to the property. I'll take care of the authorization, but I need the results before the end of the month." "Got it. You'll have them." Right after that call, I sent a copy of the power of attorney, loan documents, bank statements, and insurance history to Mr. Wells. I asked him to begin the formal process of filing for property access rights. He called back just 2 hours later. "We can send out the formal request for cooperation within 3 business days. If there's no response, we'll proceed with the next steps." I nodded, staring out the window. The skies over Austin had turned a colder shade, and the wind was picking up. I knew what I was doing might seem harsh, but no one warned me before they took a vote to cut me out of Christmas. No one asked for my approval when they removed my name from the family group chat. No one apologized when I was quietly erased from the life I helped build. That evening, as I was getting ready for a shower, my phone buzzed unexpectedly. The screen lit up. "Mom." I didn't answer. I let it ring until it stopped, then silence. A minute later, a message appeared. The tone was soft, almost performatively gentle. "Sweetheart, I noticed you haven't replied. I'm guessing you're busy. I just wanted to remind you. This year, Ethan is really trying to create a more peaceful atmosphere. We're hoping for a calm Christmas. Please understand." Not a single question about how I was doing. Not a word about the years I spent quietly holding things together behind the scenes. I didn't reply. I simply opened my laptop, forwarded the message to Mr. Wells, and added a short note to the document I'd already been keeping. December 19th. No one asked what Caroline needed, but Caroline is beginning to reclaim what's hers. On December 24th, at exactly 6:15 p.m., the temperature inside the house in Greenville dropped within minutes. The familiar hum of the heating system went silent, as though someone had siphoned the warmth right out of the kitchen, which had moments earlier been filled with conversation. In the dining room, the chandelier still glowed. The Christmas tree continued blinking red and green, but no one was laughing anymore. Jenna turned around, frowning at the wall-mounted control panel, tapping a few buttons. The screen flashed a blinking red message. "No signal. Check Wi-Fi." "What's going on with the internet?" she said loudly, turning to Kayla. "Did someone change the router password?" No one answered. Ethan got up, walked briskly into the hallway, and touched the thermostat. His fingers swiped across the touchscreen, but nothing responded. He pressed harder, then stepped back, his face tightening. There's no power. Go to the heating system, he said. Wi-Fi's down too. My mother, Linda, was seated at the head of the dining table, wearing the dark brown sweater I'd given her 2 Christmases ago. She still hadn't processed what was happening. Maybe it's the weather. The wind's been strong the past few days. Ethan pulled his phone from his pocket. First, he called the electric company, but all he got was an automated message stating, "This account is no longer active under the caller's name." He frowned and switched to calling the HVAC maintenance company. The service rep confirmed, "Sorry, but the records for that address were updated on December 20th. We can't share specifics, but access rights have been restricted due to a request from the secondary account holder." Ethan hung up and came back inside, face flushed red. Did anyone bother telling Mom who's actually listed on all these utilities? Linda looked up, clearly uneasy. Well, Caroline offered last year to take care of the contracts. To make things easier, I assumed she left them on autopay. Jenna stood up completely now. Wait, are you saying Caroline's name is on the Wi-Fi, the heating, the electricity, all of it? The temperature in the room dropped further, but it wasn't the cold. Ethan made another call to me. I knew because my phone vibrated in the pocket of my coat as I stood by the window in my Austin apartment, a mug of hot tea in hand, watching the streetlights reflect off gently falling snow. I let it ring 3 times, then let it go silent. He tried again. Twice. Still no answer. I didn't turn off my phone. I didn't block him. I just left it on silent and kept watching the snow. I hadn't cut the power. I hadn't disconnected the internet. I hadn't ruined their Christmas like Jenna would later scream in a message. I had simply exercised my legal authority, temporarily placing all utility accounts under solo oversight via the secondary account holder clause, something Linda herself had signed off on in the financial assistance paperwork back in 2021. I didn't do anything outside the law, or the truth. When I initiated that change 3 days earlier, the service providers had confirmed I had full control over the payment schedule and activation status of every utility in the house. And I had chosen to suspend all services precisely at 6 p.m. on December 24th. Not a minute early, not a minute late. I had imagined Jenna would panic. I was right. I knew Ethan would try to stay calm, then spiral once he realized he had no control. I was right about that too. As for my mother, she would stay quiet. Because she understood. She knew I wasn't someone who acted out of revenge. If I had taken action, it was because I had weighed every step, and because I had waited long enough. I stepped away from the window, walked into the kitchen, and pulled a notepad from the drawer. I jotted down a few notes on my next steps after the holidays, folded the page, and slipped it into the open file folder on the table. As I labeled the last few files, my phone lit up again. A message from an unfamiliar number. Caroline, was this you? Everyone's freaking out. I looked at the sender's name, Harper. I didn't respond right away. 1 hour later, a second message arrived. Jenna's calling for emergency repairs. Ethan's furious. Mom isn't saying anything, but I think you should know. Everyone keeps mentioning your name. I typed a few words, then deleted them. In the end, I wrote only, I didn't do anything wrong. They know that. Then I hit send. Not long after, Harper sent me a photo. It was Mom's kitchen, now lit only by flickering candles on the dinner table. Everyone was sitting around, bundled in scarves and coats, faces tight with discomfort. A simple caption sat beneath the image, Christmas in the dark. I didn't laugh. I feel triumphant. I didn't feel satisfied. Just a strange kind of peace settled over me. Some things only become visible in their absence. Light, warmth, and the people who quietly bring those things into your life. I turned off the light, walked into the living room, and lit a small candle on the table beside the sofa. The soft gold glow flickered against the wall. I pulled a blanket around me, sat down, and poured myself another cup of tea. Outside, the city still shimmered with holiday lights. But in my little apartment, I chose a Christmas that was quiet, warm, and truly mine. I hadn't broken anything. I had simply stepped back and let them face the emptiness they'd pretended not to see. I was sorting through paperwork when another message from Harper came in. It wasn't a long paragraph, not an apology, and not a question about what happened during that cold Christmas night in Greenville. Just 4 simple words. You need to see this. Attached below was a photo of a silver USB drive and a compressed video file. I froze, then sat up straighter. Harper wasn't the kind of person to send random things. She had always been quiet during family gatherings, tucked into the corner, clutching her tote bag like a shield. But Harper's eyes were never blind. She saw everything. I downloaded the file, turned on the speaker, and raised the volume just enough. The screen flickered to life, grainy, pale colors typical of a baby monitor camera. The angle pointed toward the living room in my mother's house, where that old leather sofa still sat, the same one from when I was in high school. On screen were Ethan, Jenna, my mother, and a few other relatives. Kayla sat in the corner, and Harper's shoulder appeared briefly in frame, silent as always. I heard soft clinks of glassware, then Jenna spoke, her voice even and slow, like she'd rehearsed it. Honestly, if she stops coming around, everything will be easier to split. The numbers will be clear. No, more questions about who paid what or who's holding how much. Mom, we need to be realistic. I heard my mother exhale, not agreeing, not objecting, just a long, bone-deep silence. Then Ethan spoke, sounding tired. As long as she keeps paying the bills, do whatever you want. But I'm done talking to Caroline. I'm tired of her always needing a say in everything. I leaned back, gripping the arm of the chair. My heart didn't race, but something cracked inside my chest, not from shock, but because it confirmed what I'd tried to deny for years. No one in that room objected. Not one person spoke up for me. No one asked, "Is that fair?" All this time, I'd thought I was being too sensitive, that the averted glances and forgotten invites were accidents. I'd made excuses for them. And yet here they were, calmly calculating my absence like it was a convenient subtraction. I replayed the moment, studied their faces. Jenna looked sharp, deliberate, and utterly calculated. Ethan looked tired, but never once disagreed. My mother sat still, teacup in hand, eyes down on a cushion, like that was the only way to avoid facing the truth. Then Harper's voice came soft, like a whisper. Does anyone else think this is a little cruel? Jenna turned to Harper. She's not a child. If she wanted respect, she wouldn't have made herself the outsider. Someone chuckled under their breath. I couldn't tell who. It didn't matter anymore. I turned off the video, letting the room return to its quiet state. But inside me, every word echoed like a bell, striking memories I'd locked away for years. All the times I came home silently, bought groceries, cleaned, fixed the plumbing because I thought that's what family does. All the times I was left out of group photos, or mentioned after the family dog in Facebook posts about what family means. A new message from Harper came about 30 minutes later. Are you mad at me? I replied immediately, no, I know you did your best. She responded fast. I didn't think they'd get recorded at that exact moment, but I saved it. It didn't feel right. They can be angry, but they don't get to act like you don't exist. I pressed my lips together. Her words pierced through the scar tissue I'd grown, because they forced me to face what I'd endured all along. I had existed, quietly, diligently, but they chose not to acknowledge me, and now they were treating my departure like a gift they'd been granted. I thanked Harper, then saved the entire recording, photo, and messages into my proof folder. I added a new tag, intention, recorded evidence. Evidence wasn't just for revenge. It was the map out of the maze I'd mistaken for home, a maze built by people who wore my last name but saw me only as a wallet. I didn't feel relieved, but I saw more clearly than ever. Clarity isn't always comforting, but it's the first step to never bowing your head again. That night, I skipped dinner. I made a cup of tea, played some instrumental music, and sat at my desk under a soft golden lamp. No calls, no yelling. I knew they would see what I was about to send soon enough. I sat at the computer, fingers resting on the keyboard, with a calm that surprised even me. I didn't need to edit my words much. No need to soften the tone or carefully select pronouns to keep the peace. This email wasn't a confession. It wasn't a debate. It was simply a summary, clear, direct, emotionless. One keystroke to close out 3 years of being the useful shadow. I typed the subject line first. Subject: I've stepped out of this story and took the light with me. The message was short, just a few lines. To those I used to call family, attached is a file summarizing every payment I've made over the past 3 years concerning the property at 147 Brookside Lane, the house I once believed was ours. Included mortgage payments from January 2021 through December 2023. Roof repair bill after the storm, paid on March 14, 2021. Property insurance in my name, paid monthly for 36 months. A notarized co-sponsorship agreement signed by Linda Adams. Electrical maintenance invoices, heating system repairs, and all related utilities. I was no longer part of Christmas dinner, nor part of the meetings I was never invited to. But for those 3 years, without me, that house would have been cold, dark, and very likely unlivable. I didn't need an apology. Just silence, just like they've always given me. Caroline. I reread it once, made no edits, attached the file titled GRE Records, Caroline, PDF, then hit send. Less than 3 minutes later, I got the notification. Every recipient had read the email. No one replied right away, but I could already picture the stunned silence spreading across the old dining table in Greenville like oil on a tablecloth. Moments later, my phone lit up. A message from Ethan. What did you just do? Mom's freaking out. Jenna's losing it. Are you seriously trying to blow everything up? I didn't reply. I didn't need to argue. The numbers in the email had done that for me. 5 minutes later came a missed call from Mom. Then 3 calls in a row from Jenna. I placed my phone face down on the table and walked off to make a new pot of tea. The kettle began to rumble softly, but I didn't rush to pour. I waited, letting the phone vibrations fade like waves after a storm. Back at my computer, I reopened the email I had just sent. Sometimes the clearest way to understand your own heart is to read what you wrote when you were most clear-headed. I had no regrets. Everything was accurate. Everything had proof. Not long after, a reply came from Mom's email address. Just one line. Can you call me? We need to talk. I leaned back in my chair. No, I'm sorry. No, I didn't know what they were doing behind your back. No acknowledgement that she had signed the financial agreement herself, and then turned a blind eye as I was pushed out of the family picture. The phone buzzed again. A message from Jenna. Caroline, what is wrong with you? This is family, not a corporation. You think a spreadsheet is going to make everyone bow down? You're pushing yourself further away. I let out a quiet laugh. It wasn't bitter or mocking, just the only reaction I had left when patience runs out. I opened the document again. The last line I'd typed at dawn was still there. Note: all contributions are documented with receipts and confirmations, filed monthly and clearly categorized. If necessary, I'm prepared to work directly with a financial or legal advisor. I didn't think it would come to that, but I wasn't afraid anymore. That night, as I sorted the physical copies to send by mail, Harper called. Hey, her voice. Soft. They know. I stopped what I was doing, held the phone close to my ear. Did you hear what they said? I asked. Jenna's screaming that you tracked every penny just to hold it against them. Ethan didn't say anything, just stood there. Aunt Linda. Mom sat quietly for a long time and then told everyone to leave so she could make a phone call. But she didn't call you. I let out a soft chuckle. That's okay. I don't need her to call. Harper hesitated. I think you did the right thing. If you hadn't spoken up, they'd keep treating everything you did like it was just expected, like a quiet ATM machine. I know, I said, my voice lowering. But the part that hurts the most is, even Mom didn't stop them when they planned to cut me out. She didn't speak up. She didn't defend me. Not once. Harper was quiet. After a pause, she whispered, I think. Sometimes people choose peace over fairness, but that kind of peace never really lasts. I smiled. Thank you. I ended the call, sealed the folder inside a large envelope, and labeled it Archive, Carolina A, Greenville House, Financial Closure. I placed it on the table beside my now cold cup of tea. Then I turned off the desk lamp, stood up, and walked to the window. Outside, the night was still. No snow, just warm yellow light from the street lamps reflecting off the damp pavement. I leaned my forehead against the cold glass, and I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation. I hadn't broken anything. I had simply let go of the reins I'd been gripping for 3 years and left them to hold up something that had only ever stood because of me. My phone started buzzing nonstop the next morning, while the sky outside was still gray and the early city buses rumbled faintly down the street. On the screen was a string of missed calls: Mom, Ethan, and an unknown number I assumed was Jenna. I sat at the kitchen table, fingers wrapped, around a steaming mug of black coffee, silently watching the screen flash. I didn't pick up a single call. I didn't need to hear words that were too late to matter. And I wasn't about to let anyone turn my clarity into an excuse to drag me back into the cycle of silence and sacrifice. I took a sip of coffee, opened my laptop, and logged into the asset management portal of the Greenville Financial Office. A prepared document from the previous week appeared detailing the full transaction history tied to the Brookside Lane property from the time I began co-sponsoring it until this month. I attached the file and added a formal request. I, Caroline Adams, am a co-named party on the financial records of the property at 147 Brookside Lane. Based on consistent financial investments from 2020 through the present, I request a full ownership transfer of said property under my name as fair compensation for executed expenses, including mortgage payments, structural, repairs, home insurance, and fixed utility costs. Please process this request within the valid time frame. I double-checked everything, then hit send. 10 minutes later, Ethan texted again, no pretense. Mom's using candles on Christmas night because of you. You think this is fair? You're making yourself the enemy of your own family. I didn't reply. 1 hour later, Jenna sent an email. The subject line was long and cold. Notice: legal action will be considered. She wrote 3 lengthy paragraphs listing why she believed my actions were hostile, controlling, and damaging to the shared interests of the family. One paragraph even threatened that she would hire a personal attorney to protect Ethan and Linda's rights. I didn't reply to Jenna. I simply forwarded the email to Mr. Wells with a single note: please file this. This is the first response after I stopped making payments. That same afternoon, Mr. Wells called me back. We're in a strong position, Caroline. All the evidence is on your side. And unless they can prove your financial contributions were illegitimate, which I find nearly impossible, your request to transfer ownership is entirely feasible. I leaned back in my chair, slowly twirling my pen. I don't want to break anything, I said quietly. I just don't want to keep maintaining a house I'm not allowed to step into. Mister? Wells paused for a moment, then responded, his voice steady and seasoned with experience. Sometimes, the only thing people have left to hold on to is illusion. You are under no obligation to preserve their illusion, especially when it was built on your sacrifice. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. That night, just as I set my phone aside to rest, it rang again. This time, it was my mother. I let it ring like I had before, but on the 4th ring, I picked up. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to hear what she'd say when she wasn't shielded by others. Caroline. Her voice was hoarse, choked like she had just been crying. I don't understand why you chose this way. I stayed silent. She went on. You've always been the thoughtful one. Always the one who understood things. And now, it feels like you're doing all this to punish me. Why didn't you talk to me first? Why send those cold documents to everyone? I took a long breath, keeping my tone calm. Because when I stayed silent, no one asked what I was thinking, Mom. When I did everything without asking for anything, people assumed I didn't need a thing. And when I was excluded from a meeting where I paid for the very table they were sitting at, no one said a word in my defense. On the other end, she fell quiet. I heard the soft sound of someone trying not to cry. I'm so tired, Caroline. I just wanted everything to stay peaceful. I gently but clearly cut in. So did I. But peace can't exist when one person suffers while the rest are allowed to forget who's keeping the lights on. There was a long silence. No sobbing, no blame. Just space, the kind that, between me and my mother, wasn't filled with expectations but reflection. I won't be calling anymore, I said, and I won't be answering any more angry messages. But if one day you truly want to talk, not to correct me or make me feel guilty, but to actually talk, I'm still here. I hung up. I didn't wait for her to say anything more. I didn't feel relieved afterward. I didn't cry. I just sat still for a while, my hand resting on the wooden table, my heart free from resentment or hope. I didn't need them to understand right away. But I needed them to start owning the consequences of their choices. They chose to exclude me from the dinner. Now I was simply taking the table I'd helped build for 3 years with me. And they would have to figure out how to sit together, whether in the dark or under the light of truth. That was up to them. I woke up on the morning of December 25th to the soft winter light filtering through the window of my small apartment in Austin. Outside, it was freezing, the trees still wet with dew after the night's rain. But inside, I felt a different kind of warmth, not from the heater, but from the peace I hadn't known in years. No phone ringing nonstop, no judgmental voices, no one complaining that I didn't drive 10 hours to be there for the family. No pressure to smile at gatherings where I was nothing but a shadow at the edge. Just me, and that, today, was a gift. I brewed a pot of tea, opened a can of cream of mushroom soup, and poured it into a small pot to warm. No fancy setup. I ladled the soup into a plain ceramic bowl and placed it on the dining table by the window where I usually wrote in the mornings. I pulled a wool scarf over my shoulders, turned on some soft jazz, the saxophone filling the quiet space with warmth. Then, I opened my old notebook to a fresh page. I wrote the first line with a steady hand. This year, no one's disappointed that I stopped trying to please them. I paused, lifting my gaze out the window. Cars slowly rolled down the wet street. Someone walked their dog. Someone in a red coat carried a gift box. I smiled not because I felt lonely, but because I realized I had finally returned to myself. My phone buzzed. It was Harper. A message appeared. "Do you want to talk to Grandma? She asked about you." I stared at the screen for a long moment, my heart stirring. Grandma, the only one I still felt a fragile thread connecting me to the family. I remembered her wrinkled hand resting on mine the day I graduated, her silent eyes following me when the whole family cheered for Ethan's promotion. I set the phone on the table, waited a beat, then typed, "Tell her that this year, for the first time, I don't feel invisible." I hit send, then let my hand fall to my lap, feeling oddly lighter. No anger, no blame. Just the first Christmas in nearly 20 years where I didn't have to apologize for existing. I washed the bowl, folded the tablecloth, then stepped out onto the small balcony to catch the last sunlight of the afternoon. In the distance were low hills covered in pine. There was no Christmas tree in my apartment this year, no wreaths, no twinkling lights, and yet everything was enough. I didn't need an invitation or permission to enjoy winter in my own way. 1 week later, on the last day of the year, I walked into Mr. Wells's law office. In my hand was the file I had carefully prepared, notarized copies of all expense records, email exchanges, and co-ownership documents. "Mr. Wells shook my hand, his expression satisfied but discreet. "Everything is finalized. You just need to sign here." I took the pen. My hand didn't tremble like it did the first time I met him. I signed my name once, clearly, decisively. Caroline Marie Adams. From that moment on, all financial rights, ownership, and managerial control of the house on Brookside Lane were transferred to me. I had the authority to sell it, rent it out, or handle it however I deemed appropriate. But I didn't do anything. I simply left it there, a marker for the boundary I had drawn. The family still lived in it, at least until the sublease contract I drafted went into effect. They weren't evicted. I didn't seek revenge. I simply reclaimed my place. No more Christmas dinners where I was excluded from the table. No more family meetings held behind my back. No more sarcastic texts or patronizing tones whenever they needed my money. I removed myself from the old story. Not with tears, not with yelling, but with a signature, with paperwork, with the cold, precise numbers they once believed I'd never dare to use. I didn't wait for them to call back. I didn't wait for apologies, because I no longer lived in the circle where my presence was a burden to be hidden. I lived in a space I chose, with boundaries I set, and with a self-respect I held tightly like a small candle, warm, and enough to light my own path. Have you ever felt like the only one holding together a home that's quietly crumbling until you finally step away and realize everything still goes on without you? I once believed that without me, everything would fall apart. But the truth is, sometimes, the only thing that collapses is the illusion that family love is always unconditional. And when I let go of those unreasonable expectations, that's when I finally felt peace. What about you? Have you ever stood at the edge between sacrifice and freedom? Have you ever chosen silence just to keep the peace, only to realize you were being erased from the story altogether? If you saw a piece of yourself in this story, leave a comment below. I want to hear from those who've dared to step out of the role of the one who always endures. And if you appreciate heartfelt, honest stories about family, choices, and self-worth, subscribe to the channel to join me in discovering more real-life journeys like this. Because sometimes, the quietest things are the ones that move us the most.